The Best You TV, a TV channel with only the best business leaders and influencers ready to help you rise to the top. Available now on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Google Play. Learn and grow from in-depth interviews, documentaries, inspirational talks, and motivational masterclasses from the world's biggest thought leaders, speakers, teachers, authors, coaches, and highly successful business gurus. The Best You TV is now live. Best You Store, helping you do more, achieve more, be more. Store.thebestyou.co.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from around the world. And welcome to the Best Expo Virtual Live in London. I'm Sarah Jane Jones, and this is my co-host,
Ruth Carter, the Liberty Coach. And I'm glad to be here with you all this morning in sunny London.
And today we a fantastic lineup, and we have amazing giveaways, and this is another reason why today you should be joining us to cash in on these opportunities.
Hopefully you've seen some of the links where you can still get your free ticket today, and I'm just going to announce to you some of the absolute amazing giveaways at the Best You and some of the other speakers that will be highlighted over the course of this weekend. Let's start off with what the Best You is going to be offering you as part of the giveaway. You can get 100 of the Best You's online membership, which would total at least over 15,000. They're just giving that away for any of you that are going to be on this platform today. And also our host, Bernardo Moya, he's given 1,000 audio books of his book, The Question. And then we've also got some of you who may want to expand your TV presence. They're giving an amazing offer, which is totaling $4,997 to expand your brand as part of the Best You TV. You've also got Bernardo offering 5 special slots for Rise to the Top online program. And there's going to be a lucky person who's going to be able to get a speaker slot at the next Best You Expo. And that ranges from $1,900 to $5,000. How amazing is that to get things started?
That's just amazing. Wouldn't you just like that? So now the Best Expo has grown, and it has grown and grown over the years, and it is offering so much. The Best You has many things coming up over the next year. It's just adding to what already is out there for your personal development. So I'm just going to tell you about a few things that is coming up in the near future, and which you can join in. So we have the Best Expo for Women, a global international event, hopefully coming in 2022. We also have a Best Expo for Youth. This is a really good area for people who are developing in the youth, and it's an area we all need. The Best Expo TV series. This is going to be absolutely amazing. You'll be able to watch this from the comfort of your own home. There's going to be coaches, the best speakers, there's going to be authors. You can literally just be in lockdown in your own home and still inspire yourself. We have a small ad that is just going to show you what is going to be launched on this TV. Okay, I'll just go on to the next few things. So we've got the Best TV. So this is going to be available on Apple, Amazon, Fire Stick. This is going to be the Expo Talks, the Inspiring Talks. This is going to be the Life Talks. This is all going to be streamed daily in your own home. We have plenty to offer you. Imagine not having to go out and just putting on something that's going to inspire you, boost you, build your business, build your confidence, whatever area you're in, and you don't have to leave your home. How fantastic is we have an ad for this?
The Best You Online. Featuring in-depth interviews, motivational talks, and inspiring masterclasses from the world's top experts, motivational speakers, business gurus, and thought leaders. Leaders and influencers from all over the world are here to share their knowledge and skills with you. The Best You Online is a priceless mine of personal development wisdom, knowledge, and practical information to help you take charge of your life and take you, your business, and career beyond where you have always wanted to go. The Best You Online.
Fantastic. How about that, Ruth? Cozy
It's
19,
amazing.
Netflix. Okay, so the Best You has expanded over the years, and it has got magazines, it's online, it is everywhere. You do not have to do anything apart from have a TV nowadays, which we've all got in our homes, the internet, laptop, and phone. Access them, use them. They are there for you to grow, develop, and inspire yourself, and to be around the best people possible there is. So in all of this, it is just growing and growing. Don't be left behind. Okay.
I remember, Sarah, when actually walking through the Best You Expo 5 years ago. I remember that so clearly, so much. And it was just what we needed in London. I remember it starting right in London. And it's just what those of us that are coaches, NLP practitioners, trainers, even those who are holistic therapists, it was a place that we all could gather and really be inspired. And I remember seeing Barbara DeAngelis, and sitting in her talk and literally crying and just shedding that weight, that heaviness that sometimes come on us. And some people may be feeling that all now because we have been in lockdown for so long. And this is for you, to empower you, to get you ready. And as we're in the Empowerment Women stage, this is what we want to do. We want to set the platform. We want to set the energy right so that we can become the best versions of ourselves. So it's really thanks to Bernardo's ideas and the team around him that has really got us to this stage. And it's just phenomenal.
So Ruth, how did you get to hear about the Best You, NLP? What got you into this? How did you land developing your skills with such an amazing company?
Well, this started way back for me in 2012. I was in a place in my life where I was suffering with depression, probably had been counseling several times. And I was invited to go to the Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within event. And it was something that Tony had said before the ending of that amazing 4 days experience. He said about he uses NLP techniques, and that Dr. Richard Bandler was the best. So when that name stuck into my soul, I would say, I went looking for it. And then it was my nephew that found NLP Life Training. And since then, I've not looked back. It was 2014. I actually started that journey. I joined, I became an NLP practitioner, and I have been of support with them ever since. It's just changed my life, Sarah.
Wow. And you've really grown. Because I met you through doing my training as well, didn't I? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, 2016.
Yeah, absolutely.
2016. I think you was doing the NLP practitioner and I was doing the masters at that time. And we sat next to each other. And look, we're in 2021 and we still can say that we have a good friendship going. We support one another's businesses and we just actually help expand each other on a personal level.
Yeah, it's amazing. For me, I went to a Mind and Body, never been anywhere like that before. And I picked up a flyer. I went into a Paul McKenna seminar, and I wasn't in a good place. And I come out of there and I was happy, smiling. He had woken up something in me. And I remember sitting there watching him, and he was doing certain things. And I was going, I used to do that. I've just forgotten the way I used to do it. And then I picked up this flyer, and it was really interesting because 4 of us went to that event, but only 2 went to see Paul. I picked up the flyer And the following week, there was an event called Get the Life You Want. Now, no one wanted to come. And I had this burning passion inside me. There was a pull from inside me. This is what I wanted. I put out to the universe, I need something to move myself forward. And the universe just provided. The following week, I ended up in London. Okay. Back then, I had the fear of going into London. And I remember turning up into this room with about 300 people, shaking like a leaf, thinking, how did I actually manage to get the train here? I left. I didn't know who Richard was. All I knew is Paul had made a difference that day. And I needed to be in that room because I needed more. I needed to change my life. I needed to help my son. He had issues. And there was no one, everyone was going, we don't know what to do with him. So I walked out, I went into that room and I saw Richard and Paul on the stage, and I come out like a completely different person. People were like, what have you done? You didn't just go to London to a seminar. You've done something else. And I went, no, I was the one that picked up the flyer. I made the choice and decided to go there. On the second day, I'm no good with the trains and underground. I ended up back at my same train station. I had a choice. Do I get back on that train and go to that seminar, or do I return home? And thank God I returned back to that seminar. From that, it snowballed. I saw the training. Everyone was going, why are you going to spend that money on training? I said, because I will. This is an investment in me. I needed to understand how I'd done my transformation because I'd lost loads of weight. I didn't know how I did it. I just did it. I needed to help my son. I needed to pull myself together, and that was it. You were doing your masters. I was doing my practitioner. Then I did my masters, masterclass, personal enhancement, and it just grew. And people say, well, where did you get the money? Well, you cut back. You find the money to invest in yourself, to grow yourself, because it's the best investment you can ever do. Cut back here, cut back there, stockpile there. And you make it, and you turn up, and the friendships, the bonds, you meet the trainers, you meet Bernardo. And then from that, you go to the expos, and it's just a continuing, it's just there. It's like feeding our bodies and our minds. And this is what it's done for me. No, it's helped me in my daily life. It's helped me understand where I've come from, how I've done it as well. And I think that's a big thing for me to do the work that I do now. It's okay for me to say, I'd lost this weight. And I needed to know how I did it so I can then help other people. It's just snowball. And I know this has helped you with your children as well, with your work and within yourself. What impact has it made on you as a person?
It has changed my life to the opposite of what it was. If you can imagine feeling like your back is pressed up against the wall, like everything is coming through you like a train, everything with weight, everything was just holding you back and wearing you down, and your mindset was just on stuck. That was how life was for me. And you know, somewhere deep down in your mind, you just want to change, you just don't know how. And sometimes we can always get stuck on the how do you do this, how do you do that, and sometimes we just need to do it. Just like you getting on that train, making that decision, it's about deciding that you want something different, and you're at the right place. If you're here at the best you, it is about being the best you can be. Where I was in 2011 and where I am now 10 years later is two completely different people, you would think. But it just shows how transformation can take place. And I've had a lot of support from the best you, the team, all the trainers, like you said, the communication. It is lifelong. And if you're privileged to be part of any of their Facebook groups, follow them on Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn. There are opportunities that could expand you as a person and expand you professionally. What I do now is not what I was doing, even though I've kind of come back around where I started in social care, moved into education. Now I'm back with social care. It is now with more skills, tools, and experience than I actually had set off with. But because we've got such a great lineup of speakers over the course of the weekend, Some of them have been so kind to also add with the London giveaways. And I just want to mention a couple of them, if that's okay. We've got, like, we're in a pandemic. Some people are struggling financially. And I just want to put that out there. But there are some speakers that may have an answer to your solution. Darren Winters, for one. He's the Wealth and Training Company, and he is giving away VIP stock market and Forex online training. That is valued at $4,997, and he's given that away for free as part of the London giveaway. Why do I mention that? Because as much as we're in this pandemic, those stocks and those shares and those foreign exchanges, they're still going. I was even hearing the other day that they're expecting an increase in the market. So if you're thinking like I used to think, oh, no, can't be bothered, can't do that, can't learn that, actually take the tea off, and then you can find yourself that you can actually learn something new. It's just something, if you're thinking like, I've always wanted to get involved, be part of this, and then you may be actually able to get that as an opportunity. We've also got here David Fagan, who is the icon builder for Media Inc. And he's given away the Publishing Genius course, which is valued at $1,997. Like, there is some real value to some of these gifts that are given away. And you know, we've got a big headliner, Lisa Nichols, you know, from America, with Motivating the Masses. If you've ever read any of her books, watched any of her, you know, podcasts or listened to anything she does, you will always be inspired. And she's given away the Abundant Life online program, which is valued at $997. So those are just a few that I'm going to mention, but get involved and be part of the best year, because it's within you. So over to you, Sarah. Where are we next?
Well, look, people can go and download the Best You app. Keep updated with all the new things that are coming on. The TV show that they're going to be bringing out. Oh my God, Maz Sanjay. I have personally worked with this man, and he has transformed my life. And it doesn't mean that I've got to travel to the other side of London and do hours. I can now switch on a TV and see these people. Nicole Smith-Jackson, you know what I mean? These are icons. These are people who have really put in their time into their business, grown, and now are going to share it with you guys. I would say join your NLP Live Talks. You're sitting there, make that decision and just pull the NLP Talks up, play it in the background while you're working. If you're a stay-at-home person, because you've got the kids and you're doing lockdown, homeschooling, take this time out and really, really inspire yourself to use these tools. Bernardo has built this because he wants to give back. He has changed thousands of people's lives, but you have to make that decision yourself. If you're in business, there is so many business training. We're all going through this massive change at the moment where we're having to reevaluate our businesses and how to work from home. We have at the Best You the top people who can show you how to get online, how to build your social media at the touch of a finger. It is growing. It is one of the fastest growing trends out there. So keep in touch, get on the Facebook page, the NLP Live Training, the Best You community Facebook. New things are uploaded every single day. And this weekend is really a snippet of what we've got to give you. It's 2 days, 3 days for some stages, and it is absolutely amazing. So, Ruth, within this, what was your driving motivating to get and carry on moving forward? Because some people dip their finger out and pull back. But what's the best advice you can say to people to keep going? Because this is where people struggle. They say, I want to do this, I want to do that, but they sort of dip in and out. What has kept your foot on the pedal?
Energy. You know, we are energy. It's neither created nor destroyed, but it transformed from one form to another. And so for me, it's about how you feel, you know. If you have been, like I said, depressed, you know what that feels like. And if you've never experienced happiness, it's something that you would strive to. But imagine being happier each time you're doing something that just elevates you from the within. takes care of your soul, and it allows you to give energy to others that is from a good disposition, where you're sharing knowledge, sharing tips, sharing advice. It's like you become, instead of the taker, you become the giver of good knowledge, of wisdom, of, I see you going down a wrong road, and that is your choice if that's what you choose to do. But it's giving them an invitation to the possibilities and the opportunities that could possibly be out there. We've heard it so many times at the seminars. Dr. Banner would say, when he puts his feet on the floor before he even gets out of bed, he's like, what opportunities are out there for me today? And believe you me, I started modeling that. And you'll be amazed at what your energy, when it's lifted up. And the thing is, I am very mindful. Even right at this time, I have a cousin who is on a ventilator, and I'm here. And you know what? I send my prayers, I send my energy, I send my good thoughts to her and the family so that they are supported. But do I join in the grief? No, sometimes I have to step away from that because it's not going to do me any good. But I recognize the fact of when I see people coming together that were separated, that were apart, then I can look at the good things. I focus more on the positives than the negatives, because I did that for so long, for 21 years of my life. Misery, doubt, shame, guilt, and all that. So now flipping over to being over the hill, or getting up the hill, I should say, I want to go up that hill with joy, with peace, with gladness. And it's about being around the right people. They've been doing these onlines, the Best You Expos now since last year, when we needed it the most. And I'm telling you, I sat on the other side, writing my notes, and I admonish you all to get your pen and paper out, because there is going to be some nuggets that are going to be shared with each of the speakers. Even we've got our wonderful Sarah Jane, who's going to be speaking later on. Make those notes. If you want to improve your life, if you want to improve your health, make notes, listen to the strategies are out there. And this is how I see was the, driving force for me, is to keep going for better. Because when you get there, there can only be more of that. Yeah. And so what about you, Sarah? What was your saying, that moment for you?
That moment for me was, it was like having a feeling inside me and being enlightened and not letting go. And I built that feeling up inside in me. And when my friends were going, oh, we're going here, we're going there, I was like, I'm going to a seminar. And I'd get funny looks. And it was like, I know where my journey has taken me, and I know I need to invest in myself. You can go to festivals, you can go and sit in the local pub. Where's that going to be in 5 years' time? I wanted more. I wanted to be able to offer out to people at the same time. So to me, it was, as I went from an empty shell to a person full of life, love, happiness, I just wanted more of it, and I craved more of it. My motivations was as well, really, a son with special needs, and all the systems were saying, no one can help him. He's too high risk. He's not engaging. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll do it. And that's what, and they were like, you can't do it. I actually did. So he's gone from non-engaging to living independently, and they all go, how did you do it? And I'm like, I just did. I went to the seminars, I invested in the trainings, and I put it into practice. I didn't just go to a training and come home and not do nothing. It's actually going over the notes and relearning, logging onto the systems and watching it. When you have them down days, because we all do, put something on that motivates you, put the YouTube on, and Best You will come up, and all of a sudden the nuggets drop and you're like, that's where I'm going. And you just keep going. And to know that we can now help thousands of other people is just priceless. We can now give back. We've been there, so we can relate to other people and help them build whatever area of their life. It could be personal, it could be health, it could be wellness, it could be coaching them. The Best You just covers such a wide range, and it's just nice to have something at my fingertips, especially now we just can't all group together. So it's been great. Ruth is going to be speaking at 2 o'clock, I believe, and I will be speaking at 2:30. Ruth, what are you going to be talking about at 2 o'clock?
I'm going to be talking on addressing mental health is everyone's business. And we've got our first speaker going to be joining us real soon in the next few minutes at the top of the hour. And for now, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our commercial, which will be highlighting Marie Diamond. And she's a fantastic, phenomenal businesswoman. And over to her.
The Best You Online. Featuring in-depth interviews, motivational talks, and inspiring masterclasses from the world's top experts, motivational speakers, business gurus, and thought leaders. Leaders and influencers from all over the world are here to share their knowledge and skills with you. With over 500 speakers, The Best You Online is a priceless mine of personal development wisdom, knowledge, and practical information to help you take charge of your life and take you, your business, and career beyond where you have always wanted to go. The Best You Online.
The Best You Store, helping you do more, achieve more, be more. Store.thebestyou.co.
In particular, obviously, a lot of people that are starting, they're either trying to reinvent themselves or their lives, either because they want a new start or they lost their jobs. What would you say the best things to have, know, or be aware of are in order to do that, to be able to reinvent yourself?
Well, I think before you reinvent yourself, I think you need to really come to a conclusion of what has happened in your life. And I think the best conclusion is always to look at your life and say, look, this is the things I've learned from it. These are the challenges I had in that time of my life. I forgive myself for the challenges I created. I also forgive the people that have co-created the challenges with me. Because I don't think you can reinvent yourself and start all over if you don't really say thank you to what you have experienced before. Because I've gone and reinvented myself a few times in life, but you always have to go back and say, look, all right, I learned it. I will take from it what was beneficial for me, and I will really focus now on the future. So that's the first step.
Tell us about The Secret, because obviously that was kind of like a big step into your career and you becoming such a global phenomenon. How did that come? How did it all happen?
Yeah. Well, it was actually the third meeting of our Transformation Leadership Council that Jack Canfield had created. And a few weeks before, I had this dream that a woman, a blonde, blonde woman, would come to me. And she said in my dream, I'm from Australia, pay attention when I come in your life. I'm like, okay. So I woke up with that dream. And so 2 weeks later, I'm in Aspen, Colorado, and I'm at the back of the room. I was still very shy, to be honest. All these amazing people. I felt not worthy, to be honest, to be there. And so I'm sitting in the back of the room. There's one place left, and this woman shows up and said, "Hi, I'm Rhonda Byrne from Australia." I'm like, "Oh, there you are." I said, "What are you about?" And he said, "Well, I'm doing this interview for a movie, The Secret. It's for the Australian network." And she said, "A lot of people don't want to do the interview." I said, "Oh, I'm ready for you, right? So tell me, what do I need to do?" And she said, "Wow, you're so enthusiastic." I said, "Yes, I got a dream about you." So she interviewed me, and that was actually my first TV interview ever. I'd never been on camera before. So I was really starting,
Amazing.
Right? But I knew that it was going to be very powerful because I had asked for being in a movie seen by millions of people. So it was in Australia, it was on the biggest network, so I would be with millions of people. But at that time, of course, there was, we had no idea where it would go.
The Best You TV, a TV channel with only the best business leaders and influencers ready to help you rise to the top. Available now on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Google Play. Are you in the personal development world trying to reach a larger audience? Are you a motivational speaker, an author, therapist, coach, or business guru tired of pushing out content with little results? Gain more clients and expand your business today. Get your show or content on The Best You TV.
So welcome back. If you're just joining us, you're right in time for our first speaker. We'll be hearing from Roz Savage, who is the first and only so far woman to row solo across the big three oceans, the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Ocean. She also holds 4 Guinness World Book records and is appointed a member of the Order of the British Empire and services to fundraising and the environment. It was very unexpected for Roz when she was a former management consultant who decided to change her life. She embarked on getting in her boat and rowing. She has made a decision, and she thought, for one, be capable of much more than what you can intend, and 2, you need to make some changes if you want to improve your life. Health is wealth. Roz has now writes and speaks and lectures on sustainability, courage, resilience, and change. And she is our next speaker. Welcome, Roz Savage.
I was born in Cheshire, didn't do much else in Cheshire. My parents were both Methodist preachers, so they moved around quite a lot when I was growing up. So we went up to County Durham, then back to Cheshire, then over to Cambridge when I was about 12 years old. And then I went off to university at the other place. I was lucky enough to get a place at Oxford to do a law degree. So it was a pretty peripatetic childhood, and I coped with that by being a bit of a bookworm, a bit of an introvert.
Oh yeah, did you enjoy school?
I was good at it.
Yeah,
I was your typical girly swat, really.
Yeah.
That was my coping strategy for always being the new kid on the block.
And did anyone inspire you in your early years?
I used to enjoy reading books about adventure, like from Enid Blyton onwards, kids going into caves and discovering secret passageways. So I think there was an intellectual yearning for adventure, but not really a physical one. I enjoyed climbing trees, and my mother took me and my sister on some fairly outdoorsy holidays, hiking and cycling a fair bit. But I wasn't really a tomboy, much more indoorsy, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Given what I did later on, you would not have seen that coming.
No, okay. And what did you study? What did you got a degree?
I was supposed to be studying law, but having been really rubbish at PE when I was at school, when I got to Oxford, I thought, well, I really ought to do some kind of exercise, mostly motivated because I had a pretty poor body image and I wanted to be able to eat more without getting fat. So I thought, well, let's do some exercise. I know I don't like hockey or netball, and I'm not very good at them. I really was always the last kid picked for the teams. So I thought, why don't I try rowing? Because most girls haven't rowed before they get to university. There are very few girls' schools that offer it. So I took up rowing, and to my immense surprise, found that I actually really enjoyed it. I think largely because it didn't involve a ball or a stick. So I could manage to coordinate my own body in a way that my eye-hand ball coordination had never worked. And even though I'm really way too short to be a rower, I'm only 5'4", and, you know, they like you to be tall and lanky so that you got long levers to pull on the oars. I was just so keen that I was lucky enough to always be the worst person in a good crew. I sort of got promoted quite quickly through the ranks of the boats, and became pretty good, made up for my lack of size by being super fit and quite technically good, and actually just loved it.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
And what did you study?
Like I mentioned, kind of law.
Yeah.
But I mostly found that the law library was a really good place to have a sleep after an early morning rowing outing. I don't know what it is about case law, but I just had to open up the book and I'd be snoring almost immediately. So it all was a bit stressful when I got to finals, but I, with a bit of help from friends who allowed me to sit in on their cramming sessions, I managed to just about scrape a degree.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And then after that, you were working in the city, were you, for a few years?
I was, yeah. It was 1989 when I graduated, and it was very much the Wall Street era when, you know, we all wanted to be yuppies and come work in London as bankers or management consultants. So maybe I chose the lesser of those two evils. I was a management consultant. I think having grown up in a family with not very much money, you know, people certainly don't go and work for the Methodist Church because it's going to make them rich. I was rather bored with just not having the money to travel and do things. So I thought that having the well-paid job would make me happy. And I think it's a myth that a lot of people buy into, actually. It's the story of success that we're sold from really quite a young age, that having the big house and the nice car and the foreign holidays will make us into happy people. And it took me an extraordinarily long time to figure out that, in fact, I wasn't happy at all. I was actually quite profoundly miserable, and that maybe there was something wrong with this story, at least for me. It just wasn't making me happy at all.
Was there a turning point or something that made you decide
There was.
Yeah.
What really woke me up to this fact that this particular story wasn't working for me was an exercise that I did one evening after maybe a particularly bad day in the office, inspired by Stephen R. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, I've done that.
And begin with the end in mind. And so I thought my way ahead to the end of my lifetime and wrote 2 versions of my own obituary, the one that I wanted and the one that I was heading for if I carried on as I was. And just to paint a picture of where I was at that point in my life. So I'm now in my early 30s. I've been working in an office for over a decade. I've tried to love it, but I just can't find anything in this work that really fulfills me. And meanwhile, I keep seeing other people getting promoted past me. And I'm like, why am I not succeeding? I know I've got a fairly decent brain, but I just am not thriving in this environment. So in doing this exercise, I was really thinking, how do I want to feel about being me? And my self-esteem was really low by this point, because, you know, when you just feel like you're failing every single day and you hate your job and you aren't necessarily getting on with your boss all that well, you know, I was just not in a happy place. And so when I thought ahead to who do I want to be, I thought of the people whose obituaries I really enjoyed reading in the newspaper. And they seemed to be these sort of courageous, go-getting people who would just get out there and try anything at least once. And they might succeed, they might fail, but even if they failed, they pick themselves up and try again. And they just seem to have this almost gung-ho, fearless approach to life, and to have this innate self-confidence that they didn't necessarily have to be seen as successful by other people. They just really wanted to give it a go, to live adventurously. And so, very inspired by them, I wrote this fantasy obituary for myself. And it wasn't really specific on the details. It certainly didn't mention anything like rowing across oceans. But it was just more about how it would feel to be me. And it was quite strange that as I was writing it, it was almost like I'd opened a doorway into a parallel universe where I was living this amazing life and feeling so different being in that life, that it felt so real, even though it couldn't have been more different from the life I was actually living at that time. It felt authentic. It felt real, to the extent that when I finished writing it, I sat back in my chair and thought, wow, what an amazing life I've had. And then had sort of hit myself around the face and remind myself that that was just the imaginary one, the fantasy obituary. And then, of course, I had to write the one that I was actually heading for if I carried on as I was. And superficially, it looked successful, you know, decent job, decent paycheck, nice house, security, pension plan, you know, all the things that grown-ups are supposed to have. But it just seemed so grey compared with this amazing Technicolor, really vivid fantasy obituary that I'd just written.
So what did this trigger?
Well, I wish I could say I went into the office the next day and immediately quit my job and set out to live the life of adventure. But I certainly didn't, because I wasn't yet courageous enough. But weirdly, that vision that I'd created in that fantasy obituary had seemed so real to me that it set up this this dynamic. It was like a magnet operating on me, that when I arrived at certain decision points in my life, I sometimes consciously, but more often subconsciously, made choices to align myself with that new obituary. And a lot of those choices, no doubt, looked very bizarre to my friends and my family. A lot of them looked like I was majorly self-sabotaging myself. My marriage ended, I quit my job, I ended up having no home, no income, no significant relationship. I probably looked like a complete train wreck. But in fact, it was incredibly liberating. So having been the good girl all through school and somewhat less so through university, but, you know, still having managed to get a degree from Oxford, to fail conspicuously at a marriage, at a career, just let me off the hook in so many ways, to realize that I could fail and that the sun would still rise in the morning and the world would keep turning and I would keep breathing and not be struck down by a thunderbolt for not being the good girl. It was just so empowering for me. And it was such an intense and formative stage of my life.
At this stage of your life, is this when you became environmentally aware as kind of?
Yeah, that started that process when I, as part of my newfound freedom, went to Peru for 3.5 months with the specific intention of writing a book. I had this dream of being a travel writer. And the great thing about putting yourself into a scary situation, you know, I'd never backpacked before. My Spanish, I'd done a 2-week crash course in Spanish. That was the full extent of my proficiency. It was a whole new realm for me. And by now I'm 35 years old, which is, I think, relatively old to be going backpacking for the first time. The good thing about going out with the specific intention of writing a book is that even when everything is going wrong, you think, well, this sucks right now, but it's going to make a great story for the book. It enables you to be a little bit detached from what's actually happening, because you're seeing it through this lens of being an author and writing it down later on. So while I was there in Peru, I had some amazing experiences. I really felt very supported by life. Another great thing about travel is that you escape from the shackles of your home country, where you feel like you have to behave in a certain way. And I was really just experimenting with serendipity and synchronicity, and was so intrigued by how the choices I made would lead on to other choices, which would lead to other experiences. And I was really just riding that wave. But to come back to the environmental awakening, one of the more amazing experiences I had there was a pilgrimage with about 30,000 of the Peruvian Indians. So these are the indigenous people in Peru. There were only about maybe 10 or 20 white people there. And I really witnessed firsthand their reverence for nature. They have this concept of Pachamama, which really is this earth embodied, sort of like the Gaia concept. And they were on the face of it, it was superficially a Catholic festival, but it was really about the glacier that gives life to the people through the meltwaters that form the rivers and streams. It was about the mountains, it was about the sunrise, it was about the moon. It was this incredible experience for 4 or 5 days, freezing my backside off up on this big mountain with the glacier. But I found it so moving to really witness their integration is not the right word for it. It's too Western a word. Just like their deep love and interconnection with nature. And so when I got back to England, I started really looking into Indigenous culture and researching their beliefs about the earth, and particularly connected with the Hopi tribe. And they have prophecies that they believe are coming true about sort of end times. And that was my portal into environmentalism. And I started reading about climate change and all of the other insults that we're inflicting on the earth. And it's not really the planet I'm worried about, it's the humans. You know, I'm really quite fond of humans. Most of my best friends are humans. And I really started to understand that it's not about saving the planet, it's about us. The planet will be fine, and in fact would probably be better off without us. But I'm really interested in human evolution, and I would like us to see us maximize our evolution, to raise our consciousness, to become the best you, the best me, the best we that we can be. And if we degrade our planet so much that we're struggling to find water and to find food, and we've got mass migration and all of these conflicts and problems, that's really going to be very limiting on that evolutionary process. So that is my passion.
So you did this research, you started looking into this, and then how do you then all of a sudden decide you wanted to do what you wanted to do, which was, let me start rowing and crossing oceans?
Well, once I'd had this green epiphany, I really, with all the zeal of the convert, I really wanted to do whatever I could to raise awareness of these issues. And I think we sometimes forget just how far we've come in the last 10, 15 years. When I had my environmental awakening, I was sort of embarrassed that it suddenly seemed so obvious to me that we can't carry on as we are. But in my defense, when I looked around, it seemed like a lot of other people weren't really getting very activated about this either. Yeah. So I really wanted to get people's attention. But I could just have joined Greenpeace or whatever, but I really wanted to reach outside of the green choir and win new converts. And I'm not for a millisecond denigrating the work that these amazing big NGOs do. We need all of it. I just wanted to do something that, again, would be a combination of me pushing my personal limits, but also create a platform that would get people's attention. So it was at around this very formative time that I went to an event at the Royal Geographical Society as a result of the Peru trip. And there just happened to get into conversation with a guy who had rowed across the Atlantic with, of all people, his mother. Mm-hmm. And I think in my mind, up until that point, I thought of adventurers, when you read about Bear Grylls or Chris Bonington or Ranulph Fiennes, they all seem to be guys with big bushy beards. Yeah. And so for me, this was a complete disruptor to find out that somebody's mum can row across an ocean. Well, I know how to row. I wish I could say it was actually that logical. But, I sort of went, oh, someone's mum can row across an ocean. Wow, that's kind of cool. But I didn't really put all the pieces together at that particular moment. It was only later when I was on a long drive. I was driving up to Yorkshire to see my mum. And I suddenly just had this crazy idea. It just popped into my head. Why don't you row across oceans and use that as your platform through blogs, which usefully had now been invented, which is why it's good I didn't do my adventures any earlier in my life. You could use your blogs and your books and your talks and your interviews to talk to people about environmentalism. And my first reaction to this crazy idea was, that's perfect.
It's
This
amazing.
just ticks all the boxes. And then the next thought was, that's ridiculous. I can't possibly do this. It's so far outside of anything I've ever done before.
That a lot of people have done.
That a lot of people have done. I just don't know if I can do this. So it's funny looking back now, I think my heart knew immediately
You were going to do it.
that I was going to do it. But the head, the self-preserving ego was like, no, this is ridiculous.
How long did it take you to convince yourself and make it happen?
A week.
A week?
Yeah. I
Amazing.
was trying to talk, like the head was trying
Yeah.
to talk my heart out of it.
Yeah.
But every morning I would wake up and think of more reasons why it just really was the perfect project for me.
So how did you make it happen? Because obviously you needed a boat, you needed to come up with the whole concept.
Well, the first thing I had to do was tell my mum. That didn't go over too well, as you can imagine. But really, for me, that was my commitment. That was me telling another person that I was going to do this.
Yeah.
I was going to make it happen. And then you're right, there was a heck of a lot to do. So I've always been a list maker. And so almost ever since I could write, I've been making lists. So my first thing to do was make a list of what books am I going to read, what people am I going to talk to, and then from that would flow, what do I need to buy? A boat, obviously, but also all the safety equipment, toolkit, first aid kit, food, safety gear, what courses will I need to take, how much money, therefore, do I need? And I really started from there. I also phoned up my friend who rode the Atlantic with his mum and asked for his advice. And he directed me towards the Ocean Rowers Weekend, which happens in Torquay in Devon. So luckily that was just a few weeks into the future. So I went down there, found out that most ocean rowers drink like fish, came home with a bad hangover and lots of phone numbers that I could then follow up and find out more about how they'd made their campaigns.
How did
happen.
you raise the money and how did it all happen?
Raising sponsorship is quite challenging when you don't really look like an adventurer. You're in your mid-30s. You've never done anything like this before. So I tried really hard on the sponsorship side. I thought that with my corporate contacts, surely I speak their language, but no, it was really, really hard. So in the end, I only raised, I reckon it cost me about £70,000 to do the first Ocean.
Wow.
Because, I was starting from scratch. I had to buy everything, do all the courses. I only raised about 10,000 in sponsorship. So I kept thinking, well, I'll just put my savings into this. My ex had bought me out of our house. So, that money was really supposed to be to buy myself a new home. But I decided I was investing in my future. And so I kept using that money just to keep the show on the road, hoping that I would get it back in sponsorship. That didn't happen until much later, but you've got to invest in yourself, haven't you?
Well, you definitely did. And so which was the first Ocean?
Atlantic.
And you're a list maker.
Yes.
Just give me an idea. What did you need to take with you? Just give us a quick
it was
rundown.
A very big list. The most
basics.
important pieces of equipment are the water maker, which is actually plumbed into the boat, the GPS, the satellite phone, and also because I wanted to share my adventures, I had a little palm top on which I could write my blogs, add a photo, use the satellite phone to send that back to dry land. Food, obviously, quite a mountain of that. I was going to be eating 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. Toolkit, so that I could fix whatever broke out there, because there aren't too many hardware stores in the middle of the Atlantic. No. First aid kit, likewise, very few branches of boots in the middle of the Atlantic. I really was going to have to be completely self-sufficient for the 100 or so days it was going to take me to cross.
So it was 100 and odd days. How many rows was that approximately?
Oar strokes.
Yeah.
I was taking about 10,000 oar strokes a day.
Yeah.
So that's about a million.
Yeah, a million.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So mindset. How did you get around it? You've obviously had amazing, challenging days.
Every single day and night
And
was
nights,
challenging.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, that first night, it's lucky that I was so convinced that this was the perfect project for me, because there were some serious moments of self-doubt. That first night, as it got dark, I'd spent the last few hours throwing up, being seasick, horribly seasick. And then as it got dark, I was exhausted. Seasickness just makes you feel really apathetic. And then I went into the cabin to try and get a bit of sleep, but the boat's tipping around like this and the waves are crashing, and you're thinking, oh my word, it sounds like the boat's going to fall apart, or at least the rudder's going to get ripped off. I was just lying there in the fetal position, just thinking, oh my word, what have I done? And I had to learn a lot about mindset. And I mostly learned what I learned by doing it wrong first. Like, I looked at the whole 3,000 miles that lay ahead of me and became completely overwhelmed, and started skipping rowing shifts. And eventually I realized, I've got to get disciplined about this. I have to just create a routine. I was messing around with the routine thinking, why does this feel so hard? Maybe I just don't have the right shift pattern. Maybe I should, instead of doing 2 hours on, 2 hours off, maybe if I try 3 hours on, 3 hours off, or why don't I do 3 hours on, 1 hour off? And, I kept switching it around until I went, you know what, this is just going to be hard. And I have to just get used to that. And
so tell us about the routine. How many hours would you row? How many hours would you rest when you got into?
I finally settled into doing 3 hours on, 1 hour off, starting a bit before sunrise and finishing a couple of hours after sunset. And then I would try and get some sleep during the night as best I could. Well, you sort of doze really rather than sleep, because you always have to keep one eye and one ear half open in case there's a ship bearing down on you. So that actually started to feel, it was still really hard, especially because I developed tendonitis in my shoulders and I had saltwater sores on my bottom, and you have to sit down to row. There's no alternative to that. So it was really hard. One of the stories that constantly inspires me is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and especially how he found meaning in the suffering of being in Auschwitz. He wasn't telling himself he was going to get out of there. He wasn't going to stay hopeful. He was just like, the gift is the suffering. Not, I will be okay despite the suffering. I think at some point you've got to really just embrace the experience and take what comes. And I look back now at the Atlantic. At the time, I was really indignant. I was like, why am I injured? Why have all 4 of my oars broken before I've even reached halfway? My camping stove has broken. My stereo has broken. In fact, the last 24 days, I didn't even have communications because my satellite phone broke. And at the time, it was sort of like, what the, I felt so called to do it. Quite literally the call to adventure. And I really felt like my heart was in the right place. I was out there to try and raise awareness of what we're doing to nature. And yet Mother Nature seemed determined to give me the hardest time possible. I was really just so indignant about that. I was like, I'm trying to help you. Will you please stop beating me up every which way? And it took me a good 10 years to realize that it was perfect. If everything had gone according to plan, it wouldn't have made nearly as compelling a story for the people who are reading my blogs. They must have been like, oh my word, what is going to go wrong next? And I wouldn't have learned anywhere near as much as I did about what I'm capable of.
So in the last 24 days, if you didn't have connection, was your messages getting out? No? No?
The only message I managed to get out in that time was one night, about halfway through the 24 days, I saw a passing ship. Just saw these lights. Didn't realize it was like nearly 1,000-foot long ship. So I called them up. I still had a marine radio, which only operates within line of sight. So I was able to hail them on that and ask them to get a message back to my mum. I scared the living daylights out of the poor guy on the other end of the radio, because it was his job to make sure that there was no other shipping in the area, and he just checked the radar, and he knew for a fact there were no other boats in the vicinity because I was that tiny.
I can imagine. Yeah.
My little 23-foot boat. So when he heard this little English voice coming out of the darkness, he was completely perplexed. But bless him, he got a message back to my poor suffering mother to let her know that I was okay.
Wow.
She could see my position. I had a
You were
transponder on the
okay,
boat,
yeah.
but I'm sure that in the small hours of the night, she probably wondered if
you
the
were just-
transponder was on the boat and if I was on the boat, or if this was just a phantom signal coming back from a transponder bobbing in the ocean.
2 questions about rowing. So when you would row 3 hours, then rest, and then you at night, how many times would you go back? Because I would assume, the current would just take you back, and you would
The worst day was 13 miles in the wrong direction.
30 miles in the wrong direction.
I think we've all had days when we feel
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
That was when there was quite a strong headwind.
Yeah.
So you can somewhat mitigate the backwards drift by putting out a sea anchor, which is a 12-foot parachute type thing
Yeah.
on a rope that's attached to the boat. So it's sort of, you put it out into the water and it grabs hold of a ton of seawater and stops you being pushed too far backwards. But it's still very frustrating when your best day is about 26 miles in the right direction to lose half a day going. And it was actually a number of days that I was being pushed backwards.
Wow.
When I just wasn't able to row. All I could do was sit there and wait till the wind changed. You can try and fight Mother Nature, but it's actually sometimes better to bide your time. In my case, give my shoulders a rest, see if I could get them to recover a little bit from the tendinitis, and then come back refreshed.
So plenty of internal dialogue going on, I can imagine.
Oh, yes.
Plenty of it. And obviously positive ones, most
Not so much.
No, well, but I mean, you carried on. So, they did win at the end. But I can only imagine the silences, those moments of just simply hearing the sea or just you rowing away. I mean, there was plenty of silence, plenty of time to think.
It's really completely silent because it's normally like from the wind and, the waves are crashing around. And it was a particularly bad year for weather on the Atlantic. 2005 was a very stormy year. So it was rough. There's something about being that alone. I did talk to my mum for about 5 minutes every day because using a satellite phone is incredibly expensive. But mostly it was just me with my own thoughts, especially after the stereo broke. And I did spend a lot of the time in a very negative place. Like all the old demons came back up, the self-doubt, the self-criticism. I beat myself up so badly. Every single day, I felt like I was failing. I had massive imposter syndrome. I'm just a management consultant, get me out of here. But I think there's a lot to be said for having enough naive optimism to get yourself into something, to have publicly committed to it, and then having too much stubborn pride to get yourself out of it.
Yeah.
There were so many times when I would have loved to, I was never actually going to quit, but I think, couldn't my boat just capsize and, then I can call for a rescue?
Yeah. I have a reason.
Yes, I can quit without dishonor.
Yeah.
But I wasn't willing to abandon my pride so much that I would just go, oh, you know what? I'm overwhelmed. Please just come and rescue me. And I found so many different ways to just keep myself going.
Okay.
I think so much of success is just not quitting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that Winston Churchill quote that success is the ability to go from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I had plenty of losses of enthusiasm, but I still managed to just keep on going. And it was really only in the last few days that I started to think, you know what? I think I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Coming back to mindset, I spent a lot of my time asking myself, can I do this? Can I do this? And the way that the mind works is it then goes, let's go check the memory banks and see if we've ever done this before.
Yeah.
It goes back through the memory banks and goes, oh, blank. No, we have no evidence we can do this. You know what? I don't think we can do this.
Yes.
And I had a bit of an epiphany one day. I was like, this is a completely bogus question. It's a pointless question. The only way I can find out whether I can do this is to just keep doing it. Just keep sticking my oars in the water for 12 hours a day, just keep showing up. And one day I will either have done this or I won't have done this, but that's really the only way I can know.
Well, I normally will. It's said that the quality of your life depends on the quality of your questions. So if you ask yourself the right questions in the right manner, you'll get
Yeah.
the right answers.
That's so true.
So you finished, you completed it, you've done it.
Yes.
How amazing was that?
Best feeling of my life. Stepping ashore in Antigua after 103 days at sea. I was just grinning from ear to ear. There was an amazing welcoming committee there, including my mum. There were school children singing, and there were people on boats sounding their air horns, and people just cheering. And I was having a major rock star moment. I was just loving it.
Of course.
And it was over. It was just such a relief. I can remember walking into my hotel room, and I'd had this vision in my mind of what it was going to be like. I'd pictured, Caribbean, there were going to be shutters on the windows and billowing white net curtains and a bed with crisp sheets on it after, my
Of course.
manky old sleeping bag that I had on the boat. There was going to be this bathroom with a shower and white fluffy towels. And, I just had that vision in my mind. And I walked into my hotel room in English Harbour in Antigua, and there it was, my dream come true. I spent about half an hour in the shower. It was
amazing.
It was amazing. It was also really bizarre to look in the full-length mirror and just go, my word, what happened to me? I'd lost about nearly 2 stone,
I can imagine.
which was, about a quarter of my body weight. So it's like, this is great. So it was an incredible feeling. And I don't think it would have been anywhere near as euphoric if I hadn't struggled so much every single day to get there. And I do think the harder we've worked for something, the greater the sense of achievement when you get there. So it was pretty awesome.
Brilliant. Amazing. Okay, so you've done that. I want to fast forward. So then when did you start thinking, what's next? What am I going to do next? How long did it take you?
Well, actually, the original vision was that I was going to do the 3 oceans.
You're going to do the 3, okay.
So even though the Atlantic had been by far the hardest thing I'd ever done, in my mind, I would have been quitting early if I hadn't have carried on. And in fact, even on the Atlantic, on the worst days, I was thinking, I'm learning so much about how not to row across an ocean. I will do this so much better the next time. So almost immediately, I started thinking about the next one because I had to. So in fact, even as I was packing up the boat in Antigua, I was already planning to get it shipped to mainland US so that I could start out from there to do the Pacific.
And when was that? What time difference was it from you completing that?
So I finished the Atlantic in March 2006, and my first attempt on the Pacific, which didn't go so well, was in August 2007. So I had about 15 months to recover and to prepare for the next one. And during that time, again, writing came to my rescue. The Atlantic had been such an intense learning curve that I hadn't really been able to assimilate it all as I went along. And it was by writing the book that I was able to really go back to my logbook, go back to all these notes I'd written, my little aha moments as I'd been going along, and really work at integrating those into myself. Because my biggest fear on finishing the Atlantic, by the end of that crossing, I'd actually started to feel like an adventurer. I really feel like I'd grown into that new definition of myself, this new self-concept. But I didn't.
How old were you? Sorry, when you did the
Atlantic. I was 37 when I started and 38 when I finished.
Okay.
I had my birthday out there. I really didn't want to leave that version, the adventurer version of me, out on the ocean. I wanted to bring her back.
Yep.
I was very conscious that when I got back onto dry land with all the usual old triggers, that I might just default back to my own old way of being. So really through writing the book and through giving talks, I was able to recreate this story about who I am so that I can show up in that way on dry land as well as on the ocean.
So tell us with the new adventures, the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, how much more experienced were you? How better were you from a mindset point of view?
Found it so much easier.
Yeah.
I'd really matured in that crucible of the Atlantic. You know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
And how many days were they each, the Pacific and Indian
Well, the
Ocean?
Pacific was a total of 250 days,
Wow.
split into 3 stages.
Yeah.
It would have been a shame to row straight past Hawaii without dropping in.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just a huge ocean.
Yeah.
And then the Indian Ocean was the longest single voyage. That was 5 months alone at sea without seeing land or another human being. But by the time I got to the Indian Ocean, I'd really got the hang of this, one day at a time. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. Just take it as it comes. It was still hard. My first attempt on the Pacific ended after 10 days. The boat was capsizing more than it should have been. I would probably have carried on, but somebody reading my blog post decided to be helpful and send out the Coast Guard to come and pick me up, much against my wishes.
Wow. Okay.
That was a bruising experience because not only was there the massive inconvenience of then having to, when they airlift you, I then had to go salvage my boat, which cost a lot of money and was quite an adventure in itself. But also the online trolls came out in force to have a go at me and my mum.
Unbelievable.
It toughened me up again in a different way.
Yeah.
I really had to develop a thicker skin and realize that it's so easy to be the critic when you're sitting in your nice, comfortable home at a keyboard.
Exactly.
And
what a sense of adventure these people have.
Exactly. It said so much more about them than it did about me. I think it's, you know, without, you know, they're just doing their thing and I had to just keep doing my thing and just prove that I was capable and competent by going out there and succeeding the next time around. Did
people support you from a sponsorship point of view, obviously, on the second and the third?
I did actually manage to get sponsorship this time around. Again, wonderful serendipity. I'd been invited to exhibit my boat at the Tech Museum in San Jose in California. And I was introduced to a CEO of a Silicon Valley tech company. And he loved my story. He was into environment. And he said, send us a proposal. So Brocade became my title sponsors for the Pacific. And they were brilliant through the whole fiasco of the Coast Guard rescue. And of course, the sad thing is that they got tons more media out of the one that went wrong than out of all the ones that went right. But that is the way of, I was going to say the way of the world. It's certainly the way of media.
Yeah.
But they were tremendously supportive.
How old were you when you completed it all? The Indian
44.
Ocean?
43.
43. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that puts to shame a lot of 40-year-olds still sitting in their sofa and trolling away or doing whatever they're doing. There's a lot I want to still cover with you, but kind of one of the things that I know you teach and you talk about is courage.
Yeah. Yes, I just got back from a semester at Yale teaching a class on courage. Who knew that would be possible?
Yeah, courage. Amazing.
Well, it's something that I really feel passionate about. And I speak as someone who was absolutely not courageous in any shape or form for most of my life. And I think one of the interesting things about courage is that the person doing the courageous thing very rarely feels courageous. Because in order for it to be courage rather than fearlessness, you actually have to have fear.
Yeah.
And often fear is a very rational response to the situation. So really the central point of my class, I can give you a whole semester in about 5 seconds, is that when your motivation is bigger than your fear, then you're able to move forward with courage. So you can look back over history, look at people like Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela, or, you know, any of the people that we really look up to who put themselves into fearful situations, but they also had this massive motivation. They had a cause that they really passionately believed in. So I think if you want to do something, but you feel like you don't have the courage to do it, you either find ways to handle your fear to diminish that, or you find ways to pump up your motivation to really nurture that and get yourself so passionate about something that ultimately it almost feels like you don't have a choice. You just feel like you have to do this thing. You can't just be a bystander.
What would you say your best assets are?
Stubborn determination definitely helps. One of the things that gives me joy is when I figure out a better way to do things, to sort of sit with a problem and see if I can find a better way to manage my mental state, or a different way to tackle some global challenge. And I suppose something else that I'm proud of, because I haven't always had it, is this ability to engage with global issues, because I definitely didn't grow up feeling any sense of agency or empowerment in the world. It was up to governments or corporations, or, it was up to other people to sort out the big issues. And it really was my discovery of our environmental challenges that gave me that strength, that gave me that level of engagement, that I reached the point where I thought, even if I can't do anything to make a difference, I just know I have to try. So I really think all of the things that I'm now proud of as my assets, apart from the stubborn determination, my mum would probably say, I think I've probably always had that bit. But the other things, the courage and the desire to do some good in the world, those are things that I've developed as I've gone along. They certainly weren't innate.
I think we were talking before that I've actually became more socially aware recently as well. It was never something that, but I am concerned. And one of the things that we really promote within the Best You is the Best You, a Better World, is the responsibility that people have who are in the business of inspiring others, is to go and really make sure that we're educating these people so they go out and make a difference too. Because it's great that you're the best version of yourself, but what can you do to make the world a better place? And I was watching one of your videos, and it was talking about what impact or difference can one person make. And you use the metaphor, the story of one Oro, and what that means when you add it up to 5 million.
Absolutely. Quite often, if I've been giving a talk and talk about my environmental passion, people come up to me and say, I feel so helpless. Like, what can I, as one person amongst 7.3 billion, what can I do to make a difference? And absolutely, the 5 million oar strokes that it took me to get across 3 oceans, one oar stroke only gets me a few feet, but you take 5 million tiny actions and they really do add up. And I am also a real believer in tipping points, whether this is environmental awareness or the raising of consciousness or whatever movement has ever changed the world. It is an accumulation of individuals waking up and believing that they can make a difference. And it's great to get people to do their recycling and to walk more and drive less and to fly less and all of these things. But I also think that one of the most powerful things that we can do is to share our story. As I guess that's my thing, is that when we speak our truth about how we feel about the world, how we feel about nature, how we feel that we're part of nature, how we want to preserve the earth for future generations, whatever angle it is, whatever passion we have, when we just tell our story, it's not necessarily that we're trying to wag our fingers at people and tell them that they're doing it all wrong, because I don't think that shame and guilt are very motivating. But I think that when we just tell our story in a way that can resonate with people, and they go, wow, yeah, you know what, I love nature too. I love being in the woods or in the forest or out on the ocean or whatever. When we sort of waken that in them, I do think that raising of consciousness and our success in creating a sustainable future for ourselves, I do think that those are absolutely interlinked.
We were talking about Sky's Ocean Rescue, and I particularly love it, and I think it's such an eye-opener.
Yeah.
It's providing so much information to so many people. You must have seen amazing things on your travels, and plastic, and how it's really affecting the seas and the oceans. And your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'd like to talk about the beautiful, amazing things that I saw in the ocean. It's always a good day when you see dolphins or whales or turtles, my favourite. And turtles are quite friendly. They'll come right up to the boat. And the first time I saw a turtle, it really took me by surprise because I heard this bang on the bottom of the boat. I'm like, I'm in the middle of the Atlantic. The ocean's 2 miles deep here. What on earth have I just bumped into? So I go out and I'm looking around, and then I just see this turtle peering up at me from the water. And that would just put a huge smile on my face. The dolphins I found a little bit superior. You know, they're so graceful. They were totally showing off. I don't know how fast they go, but, you know, I'm doing about 2 miles an hour and they just come cruising past. So I felt like they were looking down their noses at me a little bit, but it was still very cool to see them. And the whales, you always know when they're there because they spout and it makes a very strong fishy smell. And so you're like, oh, I think there must be a whale around here. And the stars at night are just incredible. The whole Milky Way, because you're so far away from light pollution.
Yeah, thank you.
So you could just see zillions.
Thank you for sharing the beautiful things. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. That's great. I can imagine. I can only imagine.
Yeah. Yes, I wish that you could do a mind meld and really see that through my eyes, because it is a spectacular place. And also very humbling, because it does make you feel very tiny and full of awe in the face of all that. You mentioned the plastics. It is quite jarring when you are in this great wilderness and you see something like a plastic bottle. Thank you so much for having a jug of water here, not plastic bottles. I really appreciate that. Or you see an abandoned fishing net. What I certainly haven't seen is islands of plastic. I know there's this, a lot of people ask me about that. Most of the plastic does break up into little pieces. So unfortunately, if it was a big island, we could probably go throw a big net over it and tow it back and recycle it. But mostly the plastic, as it gets brittle in the sunlight, it fragments into tiny pieces, which you might think, well, so what's the big problem? Because we can't see it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, fish can see it and they eat it.
Yeah.
And so it's really not just a problem out there on the ocean, because obviously we then eat the fish. So it really is a problem right on our dinner plates. So to me, it's crazy that so many of the plastic items that end up in the oceans are things that only get used once.
Yeah.
Like plastic bags, plastic bottles, drinking straws, coffee cup lids.
Wraps on sandwiches. And,
Yes, all of these things that have such a short useful life, and yet they're made out of this incredibly durable substance that even once it breaks down, there are a lot of nasty chemicals in there that we don't really want in our food chain. And it's so easy with a bit of forethought to avoid, I always have my reusable water bottle and my coffee mug with me.
So what needs to happen?
Well, there are so many different levels to answering that question. I mean, a great place to start is to not use single-use plastic items. But in a way, I feel like it's coming back to mindset, your favorite subject, that I feel like our environmental challenges are sort of this many-headed monster. And, you can imagine this big sea monster. We can cut off the head of plastic pollution or ocean acidification or coral reef destruction or deforestation or whatever. But to be really the heart of the monster is where we need to get to. And that heart is this story that we seem to be enacting at the moment, that humans are separate from nature, that we can pollute it and exploit it as we see fit and get away with it. And that's just not true. The earth is the ultimate closed loop system, and really what goes around comes around. And why would we pollute this gorgeous planet? Because ultimately it ends up polluting our own bodies. And, it's scary, the health issues. I'm sure we all know probably quite a number of people who've had cancer, and I can't help but feel intuitively that there's a connection between all these pollutants that we're putting out there and the diseases that we're suffering. And so we are part of nature, and to reconnect to our earth and connect to future generations of humans is, I really think, the heart of the monster. And just think in that way, think of the 7th generation to come. Think, this thing that I'm doing now, this thing I'm throwing away, this thing I'm buying, this journey I'm making, if everybody did this for the next 100 years, would that make the earth more sustainable or less sustainable? And if it's making the earth less sustainable, then think twice.
Yeah, and I think kind of like, supermarkets and I know we've now putting a fee on plastic bags and it's reducing the amount, but I mean they have to be responsible also on how you present products, because if you don't, I think if you gave people an alternative for a sandwich being surrounded by plastic, or a set of avocados or 20 tomatoes you just bought, there must be alternatives to that doesn't affect the environment as much as it is now.
Yeah, and there are some fantastic people out there who really set a very high bar on sustainability, like Zero Waste Home. If you Google that. So, in the good old days, when I used to take my school lunch, it was made at home and taken in a lunchbox to school. So I know that everybody's so super busy these days, and it is very convenient being able to just go and buy a sandwich. You're right, supermarkets do need to play their part. We need laws and policies. It's got to be top down as well as bottom up.
Bottom up, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for someone that's in their mid-30s or early 20s, just finished uni, or even older, and they're looking at reinventing themselves, and they're probably thinking, oh, you know what, it's too late for me. What are your thoughts regarding that? Because you're a perfect inspiration.
I feel like that's probably one of my biggest achievements, actually, because it is notoriously difficult to reinvent ourselves. The way I think about this is that we have a story about who we are. This underlying narrative that is largely derived from childhood. When we're little, kids are just like sponges, aren't they, for everything, and as well as like soaking up all the bad words that we shouldn't have said in front of them, they also soak up a lot of information about themselves. So when parents, teachers, friends tell them who they are, they don't have a filter, they just absorb all of that. And so as we grow up, we have a certain self-concept, and often it's subconscious, and it's only when we do something that we go, oh, why did I just do that? That was totally against my own interests. That then the subconscious has become conscious, and we can examine the narrative and try and find one that works better for us. So, for example, my story that money would make me happy, having a big house would make me happy, and then realize, oh, heck, I'm living in a big house, I'm really miserable. So my story isn't working. How can I rewrite that story? And we can, by doing something like the obituary exercise, I think we can start to craft a new story that feels real to us. And then we need to make it true. We need to bring that story that at the moment is just an idea into our lived reality. And I'm not really a believer in affirmations as such, but having said that, this sounds a bit like affirmations. When I was doing the rowing, I'd get lovely comments on my blog posts with people saying, oh, you're so courageous, you're so resourceful. And I think, courageous, resourceful, me? No, I don't think so. And then I went, well, why not me? Maybe I could be. So I had this whiteboard in front of my rowing seat where I would be sitting looking at it for 12 hours a day. So I wrote these words on there, courageous, resourceful, determined, whatever. And as I went about my daily business on the boat, I really tried to embody those words in everything that I did. And as time went on, I started to own those words. I think of it like we have a little observer in our head that's watching how we behave, and it's constantly refining our story about who we are based on the behavior that it's observing. And so at first, when we try and change, it might be a bit panicky. It might be like, oh, we don't like change. If we change, something bad might happen. But as time goes on and we stick with the new pattern of behavior, it actually goes, oh, okay, well, we've been trying out this new behavior for a few weeks now and nothing bad's happened so far. So, okay, let's go with it. Let's now absorb that into the story about who we are. So this is really the way that this is the lens through which I see the world at the moment. Because often when we have a disagreement with someone else, it's because their worldview, their story about how the world works is different from our story about how the world works. Having just come back from America, I'm really seeing this between the two political parties there. They don't share a worldview. And we could probably think about in our most intimate relationships, when we have a disagreement, it might be because we're seeing the same situation through different lenses. So I think that it's so important, because we do have these stories, whether they're conscious or not, and then everything that we do makes those stories true. Did that make sense?
It did make sense. Yeah. Thank you so much. You're obviously, I can see you're very well read. You learning, growing, evolving. What's your thoughts regarding learning and reading and learning more?
Over the years, I've had so much inspiration from books. It really has. There have been some books that have just rocked my world.
You share a few?
I would love to. When I was going through my personal reinvention, I went off to Ireland for a month, stayed in a friend's cottage. It was Ireland in March, so I certainly wasn't going there for the fine weather. But I went there to really meditate, go on long walks and read. I arrived with a rucksack half full of books, and the books being lent to me by friends. But I started running out of books. So I went into the local little village, and there was a spiritual bookshop there. And as I was just browsing along the shelf, this book sort of called to me, and I don't know why. It was called Conversations with God, by Neale Donald Walsch. And at the time, I was going through my rebellion against my Methodist preacher parents, so the word God made me nearly recoil from it. But that book definitely wanted to be bought. So I bought it, and there was a phrase in it that just really changed my story about what life is for. It said that you sort of have this duty, not just to yourself, but to the collective consciousness, to be the grandest version of the greatest vision that you ever had of yourself. I was just blown away. You know, my parents were very sweet. Mum's Liz, Dad's no longer with us, but very humble, you know, very sort of small, and this grandness and this greatest. And I was like, wow, it was like permission to dream big, to live large, not as an act of selfishness, but actually to contribute to the collective consciousness, to inspire other people. Like a rising tide lifts all boats, to use a good maritime metaphor. So that one phrase just, I think, was a fundamental step on the way to this big, hairy, audacious goal to row alone across 3 oceans. I don't think I could have even aspired to that if this phrase, grandest version of the greatest vision that you ever had of yourself, hadn't been still ringing in my ears.
That's great. That's lovely. Thank you. My last question. In many, many years from now, what would you like your legacy to be?
I love this question about legacy because it's so important. I have a lot more things that I would love to do. Still so much work to do on sustainability. And I'm at the very early stages of a new, hopefully, series of projects, specific projects around specific issues in specific regions of the world. But what I really want to do with those specific missions is to use them as doorways into this much bigger question of what is the collective narrative that we as human beings in the 21st century are enacting. What is our collective story about our relationship, and how can we start recrafting